Hello guys, my name is Tommy, and today we are going to talk about why do beaches and deserts have sand. Do you remember me? Well, my name is Tommy, and today we are going to learn about it. So now I'll get my marker, or maybe you can. Now get your notebook and ready to write down some of the vocabularies you hear the some of the parts of our video. First, we're gonna talk about introduction. Earth is full of rocks. These grains of rocks are called minerals. Get your pencil and write down the word minerals. Minerals. I'll give you 5 seconds to write it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now, let's move on. Minerals are types of rocks that are found on Earth. The most common type of mineral is called quartz. Now write quartz on your book. Quartz. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now let's read. Let's continue reading. Quartz is a hard crystal that looks like glass. Most of the sand in beaches and deserts are made from quartz. So those are the vocabularies for part 1. Write them down 10 times. I'll give you 30 seconds while I write down. I'll give you about 1 minute while I write down the questions for part 1. Remember to write minerals and quartz 10 times in your notebook. So, did you finish writing the vocabulary? Well, now let's move on with the questions. Question 1 and question 2. Question 1. A crystal that looks like glass is called 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So now you see a crystal that looks like glass is. If you want to read it, you might have to consider reading again your book Daily Science. Read it again, paragraph 1. Then you will see that a crystal that looks like glass is called quartz. Now, a type of rock that is found on Earth is... What is that type of rock that is found on Earth? Well, if you read again paragraph 1, you could see that the answer is minerals. Now that you have your book ready, let's move on with the next one. Question 3. Look at this picture. We have a magnifying glass. You're looking at tiny grains of sand. The magnifying glass shows the grain of sand. It shows the grain of sand bigger. So like if you get a magnifying glass and you have a little ant, when you look through the magnifying glass, the ants look like it's growing, but it is not. It is because of the convex mirror of the magnifying glass. The convex mirror shows bigger pictures. If you have a car and the car goes near the convex mirror, when it is far, it is still big. If it goes near, it is still bigger. Now, you see, write some sentences that you will think that will answer to this question. Well, I'll give you 5 seconds and maybe 10 seconds to write sentence 1. So now, have you finished writing sentence 1? I've zoomed the video a little faster, but if you don't have much time to write it within maybe 3 seconds, then you might consider pausing the video and writing it. Then you can move on with the next one. So, you see, the answer is, when you look into a magnifying glass, you could see the grains of sand bigger. Write that down on the 2 lines in your book. If you have enough space to write 2 sentences, sentence 2 could be like this. The magnifying glass shows the grains of sand bigger. The grains of sand were weathered. And the word weathered we're going to learn in part 2. So now, have you finished writing those sentences? Well, I'll give you 10 seconds to finish it. So now, have you finished it? Well, I'm gonna raise my whiteboard. Now, if you don't have much time, you could start when I said 10 seconds, and then you could take your time to write. Take your time to write the sentences. So now I'm going to raise the board, and let's move on with part 2. In part 2, we're going to talk about water that weathers rocks. How does water weather rocks? Well, in part 2, I am going to tell you how they weather rocks. Most rocks are very hard, but we could still change them. Or you could say they can be changing. You can say them in 2 ways, but they can still be changing, or we can still change it. Maybe nature, because we don't make water. Now, this is called weathering. I just told you weathering. Now, weathering. Now, write weathering in your notebook. Have you finished writing one word, weathering, in your notebook? Well, now, let's move on. This process is called weathering. Waves of water crash onto the rock, like this. If you have a big rock, a wave of water crashes through the rocks. Then over time, like 100 years, the rock becomes tiny grains of sand. Like this is before, after. And then before, the rock was big. But after that, the water made the rock into smaller pieces. That's an example of weathering water. Bit by bit, the minerals in the rock break apart. It takes hundreds or even maybe 20 years for it to turn to grains of sand. Really long. Some beaches even have sand. For like 100 years ago, animals started roaming the earth when there was no sand. Then the continents started to appear when there were underground volcanoes. The volcanoes blew up some lands in the water, creating these shapes of the continents. Like this is the shape of Asia. The shape, I just draw Asia upside down because there's not much space. So that means an underground volcano. And there's a hole right in the middle of Asia. Where you live in Vietnam is not close to the hole. It takes about 2,000 years to get to the hole. Or maybe just 2 years. If you want to walk to the hole, you could go across the lakes and rivers. So you need about 20,000 steps, or even more, to get to the big hole in the middle of Asia, where the volcano had exploded so Asia can be formed. Yeah. This is the hole that goes deep, deep, deep down. Here's the underground volcano. Ready to explode. Boom. Just kidding. There's no more underground volcanoes in Asia. But now let's just move on with our paragraph. Over time, the rocks get smaller, bit by bit. Then, they turn into tiny grains of sand. So now, let's move on with the questions. Question 1. I'll give you 2 boxes. Then draw a circle in one box. Then draw a square in the other box. Now, the circle represents a weathered rock, and the square represents the unweathered rocks. When will water crash onto the unweathered rock, it turns into a tiny grain of sand. Tiny grains of sand are slowly moved to the beach. So that is how that cycle is formed. Now, question 2. I'll give you some time to write question 2 and write down question 2 in your notebook and write weathering 10 times. 20, 25, 30, 35, 50, 55, 60, 65, 50, 55, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90, 95, 100. I gave you 20 seconds to write down the word weathering. So now, let's just move on with the next one. First, now that you've finished part 2, we are going to have something pretty valuable. Now, get out your marker, or maybe get out a piece of paper, or maybe a cloth. Hold the cloth within 2 hands. This is like a science experiment that I want to tell you. Get the marker and then tap on the rock. And just pretending that the blanket is a rock, or maybe the towel is a rock. But if you wanted to do it in real life, you could maybe get a tennis ball. An old tennis ball that you mind getting broken, like this one. So, now that you finished day 2, let's move on to day 3. Day 3 is mostly about, as you know, wind that blows away rocks. Like this. If you throw a tennis ball, then wind will bring the tennis ball back. You throw the tennis ball again, and wind will bring it back. If you want to do the throwing and then wind blowing it back, you might use a grain of sand or a pebble, because the tennis ball is way too heavy for wind to get. I'm just like testing the experiment to see if it works. But if you see this fan, you throw a grain of sand, the sand spins and spins and spins because this fan is also spinning. It's like a sand tornado. A tornado that is made out of sand and dust, just like that. Or if you want to do it with grass, you could consider a grass tornado. Or if you want to do it with dust or maybe rocks, you could consider adults helping you with the rock tornado. There are many kinds of tornadoes, but the most common tornado is the wind tornado. It is basically warm wind and cold wind mixed together. They don't like each other, so they spin around, or maybe it's like the poles. The cold wind is the North Pole, and the warm wind is the South Pole. They attract. So, when a wind goes, then the other wind goes. They spin around so fast that you can barely see the two colors, red and white. Then they mix together to form a gray color. Then the tornado spins and spins and spins. Then when it reaches the park, it is dark. But when it goes away from the park, it is bright and sunny again. For the other part, not so good. Have you ever tried entering the eye of a tornado? The eye of tornado is basically this. The spinning tornado is this, then the center means the eye, the most powerful part of the tornado. It spins so fast in there that it could even lift 10,000 cars, 2,100 tennis balls up into the air and throwing them back down like tennis rain. If you throw a tennis ball, it comes back down, right? Well, that is another source of gravitational pull. The gravitational pull is pulling the ball down if you're, as you know, dropping the ball. You drop the ball, but it doesn't float in the air like in space when you throw a tennis ball. But if you drop the ball, it maybe land on your foot, or it will land on the ground. The ground has gravity that is pulling even your whole house down. The Earth's gravitational pull is really strong, stronger than our gravitational pull. We have a weak magnetic force. So if you touch your hand to a piece of metal, the gravitational force in your hand isn't strong enough to move the metal and stick to your hand, because our gravitational pull is weaker than the Earth's gravitational pull. The most strongest gravitational pull ever to be seen is the black hole. It sucks in everything that goes in its path. It can even suck in the biggest star in the world. Some big black holes eat their mates because the mates get so near that the gravitational pull of the bigger ones are less, or the bigger ones are stronger than the smaller black holes. So the big black hole pulls into the small black hole is being pulled into the big black hole. Sometimes it explodes. But today, gravitational pull, if you drop a rock from a high cliff, for example, Then when you hear a huge bang, that means the rock is breaking apart. That is also a part of weathering. Weathering is like changing the shape and size of some things. Now we've talked about day 3 and day 4. Let's move on to the conclusion. Day 5. Well, if you could see, day 5 has 2 science experiments. Some science experiments could be pretty hard to do. But you have a book, a big book, a book that must be 187 pages long. Then you could be, then it will be like, then you drop the book on the floor. When you put the book on the floor, you hear a bang. Then try putting another book. It makes an even bigger bang. So why is this happening? It is because of the force of the gravitational pull from the book. The book also has a gravitational pull, and the earth has a gravitational pull. So when the gravitational pull pulls 2 objects, it pulls the next object even stronger. So it hits the ground harder, hits the other thing harder. Then try dropping a third book. It makes an even bigger bang. That's because of the conclusion that they told you about this type of weathering. Let me pick up the 3 books. Now, if you have a book that's 1,000 pages, it might be okay. But the bang can maybe break down your house. Now, the next science experiment is going to talk about the sounds of the gravitational pull. Try getting a speaker. Put a USB or maybe a disk drive in it. Put it down to the ground. Could you hear an echo? Well, the gravitational pull is pulling the sound down, and another gravitational pull is also wanting to pull the sound down. So that's why it is basically having an echo. So those are some of the science experiments I want to tell you. But sometimes they really want to do it. If you have enough things to do it, of course. If you want to test the experiment yourself, you might need 2 or 3 days to complete them. You need to put the speaker on the ground and then put about 10 books. Then you could test the sound and the echo. So that is the end of today's lesson about why do beaches and deserts have sand. And the main fact is because the sand is being weathered from rocks to sand and blown to the desert and beaches. That's actually the main idea of this book. There's actually this video about science. So if you like this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button and smash the like button so you can see more videos studying science with Tommy. So see you